From WBBZ-TV Sports, it's time to beat the champ. Now, here are your hosts, Paul Peck and Sue Novoitsky.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our traveling bowling roadshow and extravaganza known as Beat the Champ. My name is Paul Peck with Sue Novoitsky, Hall of Fame bowler. We are here for the second week at Classic Lanes in Kenmore. Our first week was a pretty good start, Sue, as Pat Brick pulled off the sweep of the week. That was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, speaking of Hall of Fame bowlers, he'll be going to the Hall of Fame this year, and he gave us a Hall of Fame performance, and we've got to see if he can keep it up this week.
Yes, and for him to keep it up, he's going to have to go through some heavy hitters in the Buffalo bowling world, and that starts with one of the other best lefties in this town, Tony Dolan, followed by the always entertaining Kenyan, and Bill Swiat brings up the third spot here for this week's performances at Classic Lanes.
Right, I'm expecting more high scores, more drama, more friendly matches of back and forth. So let's see what we've got.
Yeah, let's see what we've got as Pat Brick tries to keep that three-game winning streak alive. First match against Tony Dolan promises to be a classic that is coming your way, so let's get rolling. A pair of legendary lefties will start things off for us here at Classic Lanes. There's Tony Dolan. He'll be the one to try to knock off Pat Brick from that three-match winning streak that he is riding at the moment. And Tony has been a regular here on the show. This is his sixth Beat the Champ show appearance. And he starts off by leaving the 7-pin. 5 wins and 4 losses, 1 weekly win, 1 trophy for Tony Dolan. We're here at Classic Lanes in Kenmore on Military Road, just off Sheridan, classiclanesny.com. And there aren't two bigger names particularly. They may be lefty or righty. There are barely two bigger names than Pat and Tony, but when you're sliding onto the left-hand side, these are the two guys, aren't they, Sue?
Yeah, especially here on Beat the Champ, we've seen and heard a lot about Tony, and we know from watching how strong a bowler he is, and very unlike him to be missing a corner pin.
Yeah, very unlikely, missing the 1-pin spare, which if you were watching with us last week, you saw that was an issue for a couple of the bowlers. So it's an open frame right to begin with for Tony Dolan. And here's our first look at Pat Brick, coming off an impressive 3-match sweep of last week's show, just the 4th Beat the Champ bowler to sweep a week. And there's a nice strike for Pat. But Pat was the first guy who was the top qualifier who started against the returning champion and swept a week. And that may be even bigger accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a prize fund for the qualifiers, so they do get rewarded for where they finish in qualifying. So being a high qualifier, there was a prize fund involved in that too before he even came on to start bowling on our show. But it's not always an advantage to be high qualifier. You see in any bowling, PBA style, anything, being a high qualifier is sometimes a difficult position to defend.
Here's the second frame for Pat Brick. It's a strike. You saw our social media ways to keep in touch with us on Twitter at BeatTheChampTV, hashtag BeatTheChamp, or you can always like us on our Facebook page. All of the updates on qualifying, scoring, wins, statistics, everything is available on our Facebook page. So make sure you check that out. And there's the Tony Dolan that we know and love with a strike here in the second frame. Tony's got some special guests cheering him on here today. There is his little niece, Megan, getting a chance to watch Uncle Tony before she goes back to school or starts school at pre-K next week. And we had a chance on one of the previous shows to see her sister Meredith cheer on Uncle Tony. Good strike there in the third frame.
Just a little bit wobbly out of the gate. Now he's figured it out.
Usually doesn't take him very long.
No.
So we got the nieces a little TV time there. Tony told us that when Megan was watching, she couldn't believe that there was Uncle Tony in the living room on TV, and she got a kick out of that. So Tony made sure to drag her here to watch this one in person before she gets started on school. And that's an interesting leave for Pat Brick with the 4 pins on the left-hand side here in frame number 3.
Yeah, he got around that one a little bit. Wasn't as straight through it, and pulled it a little bit to the right, going through the head pin, leaving a difficult spare.
49-year-old pharmacy technician from Tonawanda is Pat Brick. Been bowling since he was 7 years old. And,
wow.
Oh, we got a little lucky on that one.
That is a difficult spare. You've got the sleeper pin on top of the fact that you've got two other pins that can create a chop, which you almost saw a chop right there, and the pin came out of the gutter and just got that 7-pin out. But that's an easy spare to chop.
So you got to be good, but you got to be a little lucky, and Pat
Always.
was there. As we said, Pat Brick got off to an outstanding start, a 279 in his first match last week to beat Jeff Walsh. That 279 tied for the highest score anyone has bowled here on Beat the Champ. And then he had a 268 to beat Andy Urschel, and then his 201 was enough to beat Sam Carson to sweep the first week of action.
Yeah, dreaded transition. Whenever you bowl on lanes for a little while, you have to deal with the transition, lanes changing, you having to change with it, and that's what happened in that third match last week.
All right, so talk a little bit about what's somewhat unusual here for us, which is a pair of lefties, how that changes the strategy a little bit.
Well, it's no different than when there's a show primarily based on righties, where there's really more right-handed bowlers and left-handed bowlers. But in this case, not in our stay here at Classic. That hasn't been the case. We've had more lefties than righties, so they're just dealing with the same thing that right-handers deal with, which is carry down, and then the heads start to break down a little bit, and then the ball starts to read the lane a little bit early. So these guys, in their leagues and in their tournaments, tend not to see as much transition as they're seeing today, because this is more left-handed based. So they'll know what it feels like to be a right-hander.
There you go. 4 strikes in a row for Tony Dolan following that open frame in the first. And here's Pat Brick, 3 strikes in his first 4 frames.
So that gives Tony a slight edge, a slight 3-pin edge. And up to Pat here, how close he keeps it. Great shot.
And Pat Brick is in that groove that we saw early on in last week's matches.
This feels like a good time to take a short break. We'll be right back with more action on Beat the Champ. Welcome back to Beat the Champ. Let's get back to the action here on WBBZ-TV.
And now Tony moves back to the 6th frame, working on a stretch of 4 strikes in a row. Tony Dolan is 40 years old, been bowling since he was 5. He's from West Seneca, self-employed in the precast concrete business. Another strike, 5 in a row. Tony with an overall average of well over 230, and he's just about the busiest bowler in Western New York. Monday nights at Broadway Sports Center, Wednesday nights at Spare Time, Fridays at Abbott, and Saturdays as part of the traveling league out of that goes all over Western New York, one of the top leagues in town. Tony with a 235 average in that league.
And Tuesday and Thursday, he rests up for his league.
Exactly.
He drills bowling balls.
Right.
Practices on Sunday.
That's 6 in a row for Tony Dolan.
So that's a 14-pin lead plus. He's got strikes up, and Pat only has a spare up. So Tony's like a machine when he gets going,
Yes,
isn't he?
he is. We've seen that on this show. He has won 5 Beat the Champ matches already on this show.
Great shot.
And that's the way to bounce back from the spare with a nice 7th frame strike for Pat Brick. Keeping this one tight. Second week for us here at Classic Lanes. One of the traditional, successful, long-time bowling houses in Western New York. Always turns out good scores. We've seen that already.
Right.
Great qualifying scores,
It's under
good names.
the same ownership as Allie Brandt, Brian Borowski, who we'll talk to later in the month. And used to be Milshire Lanes when it was owned by AMF, and changed names when Brian took it over.
We are not partly based on the sitting on Military Road and not far from Sheridan Lanes was
Right.
the nature of that. But
Right.
I think classic is an appropriate name for a place like this.
Absolutely.
Tough split to pick up here for Pat, and he won't get all of it. So it's an open in the 8th frame for Pat Brick, and that's a very crucial moment here in this match.
Well, that gives Pat just an optimal score of 223 if he strikes out. So Tony's in good position if he keeps marking.
He's got 6 in a row. He won't get 7. Just a tricky 7-pin holding up there for Tony Dolan. He was our 4th qualifier for this month's action here at Classic Lanes. Of course, Pat was the first qualifier with an 8:03 series in qualifying. Spare for Tony in the 8th frame. So he's building on a pretty good sized lead at the moment.
30 plus pins, 35 if he strikes. With only 2 frames left, that's a sizable lead.
So some work cut out for Pat to try to keep his winning streak alive. And in the meantime, Tony is not going to make it easy.
Now Tony virtually needs 5 pins and 2 balls to shut Pat out here, regardless of what Pat does. But he should post him anyways.
Well, regardless of what happens in the rest of this match, Pat joins in a select and elite group of bowlers who have swept a weekly show. He did that last week. He's also the first top qualifier to sweep the first 3 matches, which means he beat the other, not only the returning champ from the week ago, but the next 2 top qualifiers, and that probably says that you're as hot as can be. You know, just you're beating the hottest guys, the returning winner and the other top qualifiers.
And it's an accomplishment for Pat to figure out how to score well on a house shot. And so this was big for him too, because he really does prefer the sport shots, and he figured it out. So he's got a lot to be proud of.
It's been fun watching him. As we talked about last week, he is one of the elite top bowlers in Western New York, obviously Hall of Fame bowler as well too, and he just, for scheduling reasons and some other reasons, he hadn't really been able to be a part of this show. So it's good to have him on this show, and it was good to see him bowl very, very well. Well, he avoided a crazy split there with a late flyer over there to knock down here in the 10th frame.
It was actually a very strange pin collision because it was a good shot.
So Pat will post up a final score here if he pulls off this single pin spare, which he does not. So it's a 211 for Pat Brick, but it's not going to be enough, as Tony Dolan is going to grab his 7th Beat the Champ victory as soon as he finishes out the 10th frame.
Nice shot.
8th strike of the match for Tony Dolan. After starting with an open frame, that's sometimes can be ominous when things begin that way, but good for Tony to shake off of that and not let it affect him at all. And that's what good bowlers and veteran bowlers are able to do. So Tony will get one more to post up his final victory score. He's already got the 225 on the board. He'll add to that a bit. And then we will get to talk to Tony and Pat. And like we said, these are 2 of the best guys in town, probably the 2 best lefties in town. And it was fun to see them match up, square off, head to head here.
Yeah, it was. They're a little bit different, but it was interesting to see them match up against each other, and it was a good match.
It was a good match. It's a 244 to 211 win for Tony Dolan over Pat Brick, ending Pat's 3-match winning streak. We'll talk to both guys and get the recap of this exciting match when we come back. You're watching Beat the Champ from here at Classic Lanes in Kenmore. 44 to 211, our final score as Tony Dolan knocks off Pat Brick. You guys have bowled together an awful lot, but not against each other very much. So what did you learn about bowling against Tony Dolan today?
I learned you can't make two bad shots against him because that's not going to win. I figured even though he opened in the first frame, I figured he was going to get to 250, so I knew I needed to get to 250, and that just wasn't in the books today, but he bowled well. He deserved it.
Is there part of you thinking that finally you made a nice little run on Beat the Champ, and how proud are you of yourself?
That's what I did what I wanted to do. I wanted to win a couple matches, and luckily enough, I won the show too last week. So I'm fine with it. Now it's up to him to carry the lefty torch.
All right, well, there you go.
Pass it on.
That's right, and it is very capably passed on soon to Mr. Dolan.
Yeah, Tony, we talked a lot about the lefty-lefty matchup. And so what's your strategy coming in against another left-hander?
Just to take it easy and watch what happens and keep an eye on your ball a little bit, but for the most part, stick to my normal game plan and watch what my ball's doing and not worry too much about what his ball did.
Does it make transition quicker?
A little bit, yeah. But
well, it didn't seem to bother him too much because Tony comes up with a victory. We've seen that before. We'll see if he can do it again. Carl Kinyon is next up for Tony Dolan. That's our next match when Beat the Champ continues from here at Classic Lanes. Next up for Tony Dolan, he'll be challenged by veteran bowler Carl Kinyon. We've seen Carl on the show before, and Carl is always one of our more entertaining bowlers. You never quite know what to expect out of Carl, both on the lanes and off the lanes. So we're looking forward to that, but we're also looking forward to see Tony Dolan try to keep his winning streak alive. And there's a very good start with a strike in the first to balance out that open frame he had in the first frame of the last match.
Just needed to test out shooting that 7 pin, so get lined up on it. No harm for him.
So here's Carl Kinyon, 57 years old, from Lockport, New York. Works full-time at Arubis Buffalo. Been bowling since he's about 10 or 12 years old. Skirts the right side of that lane, and it never quite turned to the left enough. So Carl leaves 3 pins lined up in the front, and he'll have some work for himself here to get a spare in the first frame.
Yeah, that ball went a little wide on him. I don't think that the one board was his target in this case. If so, he needs to move his feet a little bit to the right.
Yeah, much more to the right that time as Carl is able to grab the spare. Carl Kinyon is his 3rd appearance on Beat the Champ, a record of 2 wins and 1 loss. He has already taken home 1 weekly trophy here on the show, which means Carl and his brother Gary have combined for a pair of trophies in the Kinyon family trophy case. Again, way to the right, but this time it works for Carl, and he grabs the strike. And we are proud to welcome in the owner here of Classic Lanes and our friend, Brian Borowski. Brian, welcome aboard here to another edition of Beat the Champ. You're an old hat at this. We've had you on before, but it's always good to see you as well, and good to have you tell us a little bit about the history of Classic Lanes.
Welcome to Classic Lanes. The bowling center was built in 1959. Actually, there's a lot of similarities between Classic Lanes and Alley Brandt. Same architect designed both bowling centers, so there's a lot of similarities to the center. So it's kind of lucky to own them both.
It seems that whenever we come to one of these places in Western New York, they all sort of date back to the late 50s, early 60s. For people that might not understand that was the boom of bowling in our country, was it not?
Oh, yeah, it was a big boom. I mean, you had a lot of bowling centers that when they started out, they expanded. For instance, Classic and Alley Brandt both started as 24-lane centers, and they added 12 lanes to it. You saw that quite a bit in the Buffalo area with expansions that happened like in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. And that was just based on the popularity of the sport and the amount of people that wanted to be a part of it.
Exactly.
And our population was a little bit bigger then too.
Well, it was also different. I mean, you had a lot of blue-collar workers. You had certain shifts, and they had a lot of free times on their hand, so they were able to bowl, whereas today, the community is a lot more busier. and there's a lot of different things with swing shifts and everything else. So it's bowling is still popular, but it's not as it was back then.
Right, and you're also in one of the prime areas, and much is the same that we talked about being at Manor Lanes last week. You're right here in this military Sheridan area where you've got a whole bunch of industry around and plants and leagues from Dunlop and GM and all the other places that are right around this area. Is that a big part of what your bowling is here at Classic Lanes?
It is a little bit, but again, back in the day when you had tens of thousands of workers at the GM plant and Dunlap, and you had a lot more people to draw from, and the workforces there have decreased immensely.
Mm-hmm. So what's a little bit of the sort of prime bowler or prime league bowler here at Classic Lanes? What are they made up of?
It's wide variety. I mean, we have a great junior program, to our, our seniors, and also we have some pretty good classic leagues. Like Monday night is a special doubles league where it's a male-female scratch, and that represents about 18 teams in that league. So you have your better bowlers that have to bowl with a person of the opposite sex. So that makes it a lot more intriguing.
Sounds like it might be a lot of fun, Sue.
Right, the likes of Cindy Coburn, she bowls.
Cindy Coburn Carroll still
bowls in
the
that league. We
Um,
see some of the greatest bowlers in Western Europe coming through that
Correct.
league. She bowls with Eric John, I believe,
Yes.
who we've seen on the show before in the Pro Shop competition. But very few scratch leagues left around the city, so to have the best bowlers come here, it's nice for even for people to come and watch, because it's nice to see these guys bowl.
Tony Dolan, I'm sorry to interrupt, Sue. Yes. Tony Dolan had 3 strikes in the first 4 frames. Now he's working on a spare here in the 5th frame. He's got a bit of an early edge over Carl right now, but we are still certainly early in this match between Tony Dolan and Carl Kenyon.
So you have Jack in Jack's Pro Shop here also at Classic Lanes. So along with the better bowlers, people come in and get their balls professionally done and bowl on these great scoring conditions, because the conditions here are very optimal for scoring.
Yes, and it's and this is a wood condition, which it's by looks at it, it looks almost synthetic, but we take great care and pride into our lane surface to make it as high scoring as possible.
Absolutely, the surface is in great shape.
Difficult split left by Carl Kinyon, who really is playing that right side of the lane, and not every time is he getting it to move to the left and curl to the left like he wants it. So let's see what he does. How tough is this one, Sue?
Oh, you just have to hit the outside of the. Oh, very close, very close.
Yep.
It's if you hit it way to the left of the pin, it will slide over and get it.
Well, instead, that time Carl missed it, so it's an open frame in the 5th for Carl Kinyon. Only 8 pins there, and he'll try to bounce back here in frame number 6. And much better there. Strike for Carl Kinyon.
We're going to be back with more Beat the Champ bowling action in just a minute. Welcome back to Beat the Champ. Let's get back to the action here on WBBZ-TV.
It'll settle in probably another couple weeks or so. It'll settle in, and the weather will turn.
Then you got to start preparing for the holidays, your New Year's Eve party.
Doesn't slow down, does it?
It does not slow down.
But that's
until
what you
maybe
want.
June.
That's how you like it.
Yes, busy's good.
How do you manage your time between both here and Alley Brant Lanes? How do you do a lot of the juggling on being in both places?
It's a little difficult, especially since I run the Pro Shop at Alley Brant, so I need to be there a little bit more than here at Classic, but I try to be at both places as much as I can. Not too much of a social life, so it's,
This is your social life.
this is my social
Right,
life.
hanging out with bowlers is
There
your
we
social
go.
life. Hanging out with us.
Last week I talked a little bit about the community of bowlers, and it's with saying it's your social life, because it's I definitely know that feeling. I spend more time with my bowlers than I do at home, but it is quite the community and quite the social network, the bowlers, and how they get along and how enjoyable. It's just so much more than just about physically bowling.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when I grew up in Buffalo and then went away for 20 years and then came back, the people that I remembered back in the day, still remembered me and all that. So it was a great feeling to, for being away for so long.
You saw the big strike from Carl in the 9th frame, and the exclamation point that he put on it with the yell, because he knew that was a big one.
Well, that gives him an 11-pin lead.
So here he is working in the 10th frame, Carl Kinyon. Got another one.
Shot.
That is 5 in a row for Carl. What a way to take control of a match late. Carl Kinyon bowls on Tuesday nights at Alley Brant Lanes, the aforementioned bowling house. Thursdays at Kenmore, and then bowls on Fridays at Volker's Lanes as well, too. Overall average for Carl of about 212.
So Carl needs a strike here to put this match away.
Correct.
9 spare would give Tony a chance to strike out and tie.
And that's not the strike to clinch it. 4 pins left for Carl Kinyon. That changes things a little here, right?
Yeah, because Tony can strike out and win the match.
So Carl could have clinched it right there. Unable to do so. But we'll put the pressure back on Tony to respond.
Right, it's no easy task to throw 3 in a row, but at least he has the chance to get up and do it.
Good spare pickup for Carl. And that means it's a 222 on the board for Carl Kinyon. So now, with the 10th frame, what does Tony need to do?
Needs a double and 8.
2 strikes and 8 pins will win the match for Tony, 2nd in a row. Got the
There's
first strike.
one.
And as a bowler, all you want is an opportunity to win the match. You know, you hate being shut out. As long as you have an opportunity.
You want it on your right arm or left arm in this case.
At least get a chance.
So again, a strike here and 8 pins, and Tony Dolan will have a chance to be a weekly sweep winner. If not, it's Carl Kinyon and Bill Swide in our next match. Got him. Another one. He needed 2, he got 2. So now all Tony Dolan needs is 8 pins on this throw for the win.
Fortunately, we don't have a mini golf course if there's a tie. So
Is that how we're going to decide our ties?
yeah, we don't have it. We may have to go up to Lockport.
Well, I was going to say, you have one up at Alley Brant. I know you do.
We have to have a little commute in order if there's a tie.
So 8 pins for the win right here for Tony Dolan.
That's
He'll
a winner.
get all 10. And it's a good come from behind 225 to 222 win for Tony Dolan, and that was one terrific match.
That was, it's no easy task to get up there and have to throw those 3 strikes for the win. And cool as a cucumber.
Yep, and good, Brian. Good to have you there. You might be the lucky charm here on these good matches that come right down to the end. So
That's always good. Good
Right.
matches are always good for TV.
Right. Brian, hey, thanks for joining us.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for hosting us once again. I know we're going to catch up with you in a couple of weeks on our 4th show of the month here when you're going to have your league bowlers
Yes.
battle it out. So we'll get back with more from Brian in a couple of weeks. But when we come back, we'll talk to Tony and Carl about a terrific match and talk to Tony about his chance to sweep the week. It is Beat the Champ at Classic Lanes in Kenmore. We're back right after this.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It's one of the closer matches we've ever had here on Beat the Champ. So thank you, Carl and Tony, for some good drama. 225 to 222, the win for Tony. I know it doesn't sit very well with you because you had this match on your hand and it didn't go your way.
My wife just sent me a text. You had the match won. What happened? I did. I had it won. I threw a bad shot. Tony got up and doubled. He did what he needed to do. I mean, hats off to him. I seen him do it all last year, so it didn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, and Tony, again, it's a little helpless, when you know that you might not be able to control it. But Sue, he did what he needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. You saw that you had a chance to come up and finish that match off. What are you thinking when you get up and have to throw 3 in a row?
Well, I just thought if Carl gives me a chance, I'm just going to go up there and throw the best shots I can, and if they strike, they strike. And those 3 did.
Yes, they did. And it gets Tony a victory, and it gives him a chance to make it our 2nd week in a row with a weekly sweep. If you can beat Bill Swiat, you'll have a weekly sweep. We saw it last week with Pat Brick. Tony beat Pat. Now it's Tony's chance to do it. We'll find out if it happens. That's our next match. When we come back here to Classic Lanes in Kenmore, you're watching Beat the Champ. Third match of the day will feature Tony Dolan against the challenger Bill Swide, as Tony Dolan tries to become just the 4th bowler, but the 2nd in 2 weeks to pull off a 3-match sweep.
Tony's got an interesting strategy here that worked for him in the last match. Is he's choosing to start the match, which means he's going to finish. So he wants the match in his own hands, which worked for him the last game.
Yeah, and for the 2nd time in 3 matches, it's a bit of an ugly start for Tony Dolan. We're at Classic Lanes in Kenmore on Military Road. ClassicLanesNY.com is the website for all of the details. Our 2nd month, or 2nd stop, weekly stop here in our month-long stay at Classic Lanes. So Tony's got some work here for the spare, and for the 2nd time in 3 matches, it's an open frame for Tony Dolan to begin. It did not hurt him in the win over Pat Brick. He still put a 244 on the board.
Yeah, this shot just didn't get enough on it and left a washout. That's what it's called, a washout.
A washout. I like that. Here's Bill Swiat, 31 years old, from Cheektowaga. Employed by Urban Insulation, but got the day off to be a part of our show here today. And he'll grab 9 pins on the first roll. It's his 2nd appearance on the show for Bill Swiat. His first appearance came down in Jamestown a couple of months ago, where he wound up losing his only match to Chuck Jagodzinski as part of Chuck's long run down in Jamestown. So Bill's looking for his first Beat the Champ win. Overall average of 230, very impressive. Bowls 3 nights a week, Tonawanda and Wimbledon. And a big, powerful young man. And he grabs the spare on the first frame.
We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here and remind Bill that if he does manage to win this week, that Chuck Jagodzinski is waiting for him next week for a rematch.
He might like to avoid that. Chuck will be the 2nd bowler of our 3 on next week's show.
So he's got a little work ahead of him first, because Tony is no easy opponent here, even with the open frame in the first frame.
I was just about to say, despite how he may have started, that doesn't mean much of anything. And Bill couldn't get that 10 pin to fall down, so he'll go for a 2nd consecutive spare.
Bill's got a lot of revolutions on his ball. He's got a bit of a power player, and the left lane might be hooking just a little bit more, because I've seen the bowlers now, the right-handers, come up a little bit. Their ball reaction is different on lane 31.
Another spare for Bill Swiat. First 2 frames are spares for him. And now we go back to Tony Dolan, trying to shake off that open in the first.
Which you'll never know, because Tony's demeanor is pretty steady all the time.
I would say absolutely all the time. In the times that we've seen him on the show, cool as a cucumber.
You can't really tell a good shot from a bad shot by his body language.
And that's a good shot for a strike.
But we
and
did
I think
get a big smile this time.
There you go. Good to see. Good to see we get a little smile. There it is. You can still see it. I think that's probably a big key to his success.
It is. Even-tempered, you never get too high, get too low. You don't have to deal with the emotions, the adrenaline that comes from getting all heated up.
Third frame for Tony. Big strike. 2 in a row now for Tony Dolan, the 2015 Obenauer Masters champion. We discussed that earlier when he matched up with another Obenauer champion in Pat Brick. And now we go back to Bill. 10 career 300 games, 2 800 series with a high of 813 for Bill Swiat. former outstanding high school bowler at West Seneca East. And there's a nice strike. First of the match for Bill Swiat.
So Bill's standing really, really deep on the lane. If you look, his feet are way to the left on the approach, and he's playing in between the second and third arrow, closer to the third arrow. So he's inside already because of his power, because of his revolutions. He's in where there's more oil.
So is that a read of the way he thinks the lane conditions are, or does that have more to do with the way his style is?
It has to definitely do with his style. He's got a lot of revolution, so he needs some oil to hold his ball off. So he's deeper on the house patterns. There's more oil inside, less oil to the right. So when you find a bowler that's playing closer to the middle arrow, you know they throw pretty good high revolution ball.
We saw lots of pin action on that strike for Bill Swiat in the fourth frame. Now back to the lefty, Tony Dolan, and that one is not a good lead for Tony. The 4 and the 7 on the left and the 10 on the right. That ball just didn't break enough for Tony. Let's see what he can do with this. Doesn't want a second open frame, but he'll have to deal with that. So that's 2 open frames and 2 strikes in the first 4 for Tony Dolan.
Yeah, Tony's transition, he's forcing him to fish around a little bit. Again, because there's been so much play on the left side of the lane, it's going to break down a lot more.
Going back to that first match with Pat Brick where the 2 lefties squared off.
9 years difference between the two, but they're both graduates and both bowled for West Seneca East, so they have the same alma mater, high school-wise.
So a pair of proud West Seneca East graduates battling it out here in Kenmore on Beat the Champ. We're at Classic Lanes. This is our 3rd match of the day as Tony Dolan's trying for the weekly sweep. He'll get the spare in the 5th frame. Tony was actually our first Beat the Champ bowler to win 3 matches in a row, but he has not done it in a 1-week sweep. But he's got that chance here. And now back to Bill Swiat, who credits his parents, John and Peggy, for their support of his bowling career. Ooh, but that started way right and finally hooked back, but not quite enough.
Yeah, he definitely missed his target to the right. We saw with Carl Kinyon, too, that when your feet are that deep, you can't miss that far right. It's not going to recover.
Bill gives a lot of credit to Jim Reese, who has drilled every bowling ball he's ever used. That's our second bowler who's given a shout out to Jim Reese, another one of the legendary Buffalo bowling ball drillers and just bowling folks here in Western New York. Good spare pickup for Bill Swide in the 5th frame.
The action will continue on Beat the Champ in just a minute. Welcome back to Beat the Champ.
We've had roughly an average of almost 200 bowlers try to qualify for every week's show, so we expect another big crowd up at Malwitz's Island Lanes for next month's series of shows here on Beat the Champ. You saw a good strike from Tony Dolan in the 7th. Let's see what Bill will do in the 7th. He will match it with a strike of his own.
I'll tell you, it's nice if they can try to fit in an evening squad because it gives you a little bit more of options rather than just the weekend for competition. So fortunately, they have some night squads. It's a little more difficult during league time to get those night squads in, so take advantage of that on that Wednesday night.
And that's all going to be up at Malwitz's Island Lanes. That's our next stop. As Sue mentioned, we'll be taping next month's series of shows on October 5th. And 4 pins on the right-hand side will stay up for Bill Swide in the 8th frame.
Yeah, the lanes are breaking down a little challenging. We're seeing some difficult leaves. These multiple pin conversions always are skeptical as far as making them.
Yeah, and guess what? We've got another week of competition still here too. So an open frame for Bill as he gets 3 of the 4. That's 2 open frames in the last 3 for Bill.
Well, this is where you see a right-handed bowler and a left-handed bowler all going through the same thing. They're both dealing with changing lane patterns, changing conditions, their ball not reacting the way they expect it to. So it's all the same, whichever hand you throw with.
And Tony will grab 9 pins on the first throw of the 8th frame. That will keep this a very tight match, Sue. Both guys are fishing around a little bit. No one's been able to take control.
Yeah, I think the lanes have broken down actually a little bit different, which is really, it really causes you a problem because when you line up on one lane and then you go over to the other one and it plays different.
Single pin spare for Tony Dolan in the 8th frame. Keeps this one very tight. Single digit lead at the moment for Bill Swiat.
Well, if Tony strikes here, he can take the 1-pin lead back, and it'll be back in his hands again. All he needs is that lead.
Well, we saw him come up with a late win in the last match against Carl Kinyon. Tony does know how to respond when the pressure's on.
Well, this is where we talked about his demeanor. This is where his demeanor really helps him out, is an advantage, because he doesn't get all worked up and have to deal with adrenaline or throwing the ball through his target. He just goes up and he's very meticulous about getting the job done.
And in turn, the challenge for Bill Swide is to eliminate 2 open frames in the last 3 out of his mind and focus on the fact that he still has a chance to win this match as well, too. Good turn, good power, good strike for Bill Swiat in the 9th frame. So he's going to do his best to put some pressure on Tony Dolan. Tony will have the last say in all of this, much as he did in last match.
Right, that was one of the best shots I've seen Bill throw. Just came up in a difficult situation, had to make a shot, and did make a great shot. All he can do now, though, is make Tony's work harder for him, because Tony still has the match in his hands with that 1-pin lead.
10th frame for Bill Swiat. Another big strike. A little exhale of relief there from Bill.
He's had a little bit of trouble on that left lane, and that was a great recovery. He did what he had to do, made an absolutely perfect shot.
Got to keep putting the heat on. Tony Dolan will be determined by what Bill does on the next 2 throws. Big one. Big response for Bill.
Well, he knows that Tony has to match everything he does, so the more difficult he makes that for Tony, the better chance he has of winning.
Kind of like these matches that come right down to the 10th frame. It's pretty exciting, pretty dramatic. That's what's fun about the sport.
Tony brings out the best in these bowlers.
He sure does. So here it is, last throw for Bill Swiat to post his final score. A strike here would really put the heat on Tony. Oh, and that one didn't do what he wanted to. You heard the crowd respond immediately. So the final score posted up for Bill Swiat is a 199.
Well, the big thing was to make Tony have to double, and it would have been nice to have the extra 2 pins, but it was still big to get Tony to have to double here.
Okay, so that's the challenge for Tony Dolan. 2 strikes for the win.
Well, 2 strikes and count. He still needs 2 strikes and 8 pins, which is what he needed last game.
That's
2
right.
strikes and 8 pins.
First attempt, Tony Dolan needs a strike, doesn't get it. The 7-pin stays up for Tony Dolan. And now it's interesting.
Now Bill won.
Okay, well, how about that for interesting?
He needed to match him. He needed to double.
So much like in the last match, when it was Carl Kinyon that could not finish things, in this case it was Tony that could not do what he needed to do to finish.
Well, he needed a good shot there. You leave a corner pin. That's the difficult thing about bowling, is you can hit the pocket and those quarter pins don't always fall. In this case, the 7th pin didn't fall for him.
So the final score goes on the board for Tony Dolan. It is a 180, and it's a 199 to 180 win for Bill Swiat. No weekly sweep for Tony Dolan. As successful as he has been on this show, he still only has one Beat the Champ trophy because you're going to get to give it to Bill Swiat this week.
That's right. Bill came in and stole it right out of his hands.
All right, well, we will do that when we come back. We'll talk to our winner, Bill, the runner-up, Tony, and we'll preview next week's show as Bill Swiat moves on. I'm Paul Peck. She's Sue Navoyski. We're here at Classic Lanes in Kenmore, and we're back to wrap this match up on Beat the Champ right after this. Well, it's another tight match that comes right down to the 10th frame. This time it's Bill Swiat with the win over Tony Dolan. The roles were reversed on you from exactly what happened in the win over Carl Kinyon.
Exactly, yeah. The match against Carl, I really liked the right lane, and I was comfortable. This time I kept leaving one pin, and it was changing, and I tried guessing, and I just guessed wrong.
What goes through a bowler's mind when you walk up to that 10th frame knowing you needed the 2 strikes and a count to win? And I mean, there's pressure there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I mean, but you got the chance. It's not like it's over with and done. So you like having that feeling.
Right. Well, it didn't work out this time for Tony, Sue, but it certainly worked out for Bill.
Yeah, but on the left lane, was that lane playing a little bit differently for you?
Yeah, it was. It was. Coming into this, everybody was talking about the right lane. There was a spot out there that if you got it out too far, it wasn't coming back, and that kind of got in my head a little bit. Thought about it too much. And
so what was the adjustment on the left lane? Because you went up and through 2 great shots in that 10th frame on the difficult lane.
I was just trying to focus on the spot in the lane. I wasn't doing that earlier, and just stick to that spot right there. And I knew if I got it slow enough, it would carry.
Well, it turned out to be the winner there, and I'm going to hand you your trophy.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right. Well, Bill's going to get the chance to rest up a little bit because he's coming back for another week of action. We'll see Bill on next week's show. We'll preview the guys that Bill's going to have to try to beat to get another one of those when Sue and I come back. We're at Classic Lanes in Kenmore, and you're watching Beat the Champ. Boy, Sue, what a fun week we had here at Classic Lanes. It started with a great match of left-handed titans and Pat Brick and Tony Dolan, and then our final 2 matches both come down to the 10th frame and almost literally the last throws.
Well, this week was what bowling is all about, and that's matches. I mean, these matches all came down to the very end, and no one ran away with anything. It was about shot making, it was about adjusting, it was about transitions. So we really see what bowlers go through when the matches are close.
And the fun part about it is we get a first-time winner who not only wins his first Beat the Champ match, but Bill Swiat wins the trophy in the process, which means he gets to come back for another week.
Right, and he's got some great bowlers to take on next week, so it'll be interesting.
All right, well, make sure you join us to see if Bill Swiat can keep those winning ways going. We'll see you next week when we return here to Classic Lanes. Thanks for watching Beat the Champ.